Hello, you beautiful rebels of society, and welcome to this Space and Time. My name is Gabriel Lugo, and here I talk from self to self. Today I'm getting my hands dirty with this topic of the matrix of the physical reality because I love and enjoy philosophizing about the matrix in which we live in, the society that has been created by this trend or inertia of activities of humans, the human society as we know it. And of course this can be always controversial, so I'm going to give a little bit of an introduction and disclaimers as to what my position and my view is. If you don't know me already, I have no ideals. I try not to have any ideals, and whenever I recognize that something is, as it were, beating as an ideal in my heart, then I just let it go. Because I don't think that any ideal is real. It's only our biased perception of how we think things should be. And while it's not an issue to have ideals, I just think that to pursue them is or can become toxic. Toxic for the self, which includes other selves. So my interest in general on these topics have always been for knowledge, for simply knowing those things that few people knew, because this is why we get the notion that people are asleep in the matrix, because they simply are unaware of the truth that lies behind the show that is being played. And so as a young man, I was always interested in these hidden this hidden information or knowledge about society, because it made me feel like I knew things that other people didn't know. And over time, this, of course, became naturally a frustration, because I realized that a lot of people are not interested. They don't care. They don't care what's behind the scene, behind the curtain. As long as the show keeps playing, they're enjoying the show and suffering with the show. And that just caused me frustration. But as I became much more aware of the workings of reality, and from a perspective of non-duality, from the oneness of everything, this became even more interesting to me, because I could just see it as the mechanics or the flow of things as they are happening. And so this is the perspective that I want to bring here. Again, I cannot control the listener who may have specific inclinations and biases towards something, and most importantly, sensitivities to some of these topics. Very likely this is not you, but in case you are sensitive to some of the things I'm going to say, just keep in mind that I have no affiliation whatsoever with any outcome or any party that may be identifying with some of the things I'm going to say. I do believe that there is a lot of course, manipulation into the sensitivities of people, and this is why people are becoming very sensible to these conversations. So what I am going to get is the workings of society. What is it that is happening that we're seeing? What actually has been happening for hundreds of years, and actually thousands of years, that we're now seeing in manifestation in a different form, and dare I say intensifying in the rapidity in which it's almost like it's boiling. It's reaching a temperature of entropy that we're seeing change year after year after year. And this is the current workings of our society. What is happening? So, just to paint a broader picture here, and part of my position as well, which I would like you to invite you. So, whatever you are, I would like to invite you into this position of, even if you don't believe it, just see it as a movie that is happening. And this is the revealing of the separate self. I know this is hard to see for some people, but this is the grand scheme of things. The grand scheme of things is that all that is happening right now is part of the accelerated process of the revealing of the separate self. And when I say the revealing of the separate self, I also mean, and I actually specifically mean in this conversation, the collective separate self that we have been empowering for so long. The matrix. This would be the matrix in which we all recognize and talk about. This is the separate self matrix of society. And so this is just revealing. This is being unveiled, as it were, for the appreciation of the human consciousness. And as this happens, of course, many shadows are going to be shown, and things that seem uncomfortable and that are, again, we become sensitive to because they are of an sometimes people may call it unforgivable nature, and I guess that's okay. I would say that it's a disturbing nature rather, but not unforgiving, because everything can be forgiven. But rightly so, for a lot of people, it's becoming very, very disturbing. So all of this is just a revealing of the collective separate self, the matrix, which is being disclosed actually, and exposed and disclosed at the same time. And the formation of this matrix is actually rather simple to understand it. You see, let's go to the human behavior for a second, and you can see that human behavior is always childish. We're all children. When you hang out with somebody, if you allow this person to be, whoever that may be, let's talk about adults, because that's obviously the people that we want to see as children. Children are just children. And you can see the parallel here. But adults, if you allow them to be, they will show that childish nature. They will show you what they like doing and how they behave and all of this. If you don't compress them, into a conversation of what do you do for work, what do you think about this or that, when you allow them to be, you just see that child revealed. And this means that all of us adults are children, and we like playing. We create rules for the games that we play. But there are some who simply thought that the game was too real, and they had to enforce those rules on others. This is the creation of the separate self, the one that forgets that this is a game, the human game of all of us looking at reality from a certain point, sharing it with each other, and knowing that we would never be able to share it completely with the others. So we create certain symbols in which we can express our shared reality. But some people take it too serious, like I said, and they start creating rules, and those rules become law, and then that law becomes enforced on us. So this is the creation of the elite. This is how those at the top gradually started being more and more thirsty for power, because they tasted the manna of empowerment by ruling others. And when we see this, we realize that over time, this is what we've had. What we have is a society that has grown accustomed to authority, because this authority comes from those who are afraid of losing their game, of losing their control over others. We don't have to go so far, but any empire, any ruling society has had these people. And the thing is that over time, they had to hide themselves from the common perception of humans, because one, they didn't need to be out in the open, just like monarchs were in the past, and they would simply dictate what was happening. Dictators and monarchs became too obvious for people, and you wouldn't allow a monarch to be like a dictator. So those who rule society had to hide behind a certain structure. The structure is what we know now as governments and institutions and corporations and so on. So that's the front. This is what is being it's being used as a facade. But there is people behind that, of course, benefits from all of this. And their authority is really what trickles down through this very intricate system, which is not necessary for us to go into, but just to know that this is a natural progress. I mean, I'm not advocating any conspiracy theory at all. I mean, I don't think we need that anymore in society. I think the distinction between conspiracy theory and actual reality has been blurred so far in the past couple of years, to the point that it's just simply how it is. And I will actually get into some of these, this blurring of the line between that which was considered ridiculous with reality right now. But the important part here is to know that this is just the natural process in which, let's say, the separate self evolves from a simple ruler in a village to a massive global ruler, because that is just the tendency. You can never have enough. I recently recorded an episode on the Law of One where I covered the hierarchy of Orion. And so if we are open to accept that there is an energy in this universe, of course, that promotes the negative path of separation, then, and we know that is hidden from us because we're talking about interdimensional energy that exists in our reality, then how far-fetched it is to see that there are humans hidden behind the facade of corporations, institutions, governments, and everything else. That is our authority. The key word here is, don't lose it, is authority. Don't miss it, is authority. It's all about authority. You see, as you become a lot more relaxed from the idea that you are a human being that must survive, when you relax to this, then you see that authority has simply no power over you. And you see the childish nature of this rule of authority being played on you and others. But as long as you are considered a separate self, individually, then you are sensitive to authority. You are afraid of authority, because that's really what authority means. It rules by fear. And so, just like it is natural for us to see the evolution of the separate self, the ruling separate self, to a hidden position, because being in the open no longer serves its purpose, and also it creates a higher and higher pecking order in which it can dominate. And those that we see at the top, what we consider to be at the top, are only at the bottom of a certain pyramid. And depending on how far we want to go, we could even say that the interdimensional beings that live in 6th density consciousness or 5th density consciousness, those are the ones at the top of the pyramid. And what we see as the elite, there is an internet phenomenon, or I don't even know what to call it, but it's called the hidden hand. And it's a text that it takes from the Law of One a lot of, it actually talks about the Law of One as being a legitimate source of true information for the evolution of the soul and the domination of planets and so on. But the hidden hand, of course, is of negative source, and it's actually said right in there that is negative. But in any case, all of this is the man behind the curtain, the complexity of the pecking order behind the curtain. And the curtain for us is just the government, institutions, corporations, financial systems, and so on. All of this facade for those behind. So if we can accept this and say, well, yes, sure, it's natural to see this evolution of the village leader that became ever more thirsty of power and its legacy enduring over time, and those who became allies to this leader in the village obviously perpetuated this over time, and they wanted to maintain the structure, and this structure was the elite. We have seen it from Egyptians' times all the way up to now, so I don't think I need to spend more time convincing you, the listener, that this is just a natural progression of the separate self as it gains in power and control over others. So what follows is an intensification of authority, because as population grows, you become a little bit more, or gradually more concerned with the possibility of losing control. Because if you can have a limited amount of people to be controlled, then you feel like that is all that there is. But when population growth increases, then you are scared that people are going to get literally out of control. And this is what's been happening for decades already. People have been getting out of control. You can even see how in our vocabulary, getting out of control is something that is, it's to be afraid, to be feared. Oh, people are getting out of control. We must do something. Why? Why do we must be within control? Does that even make sense? I'm sure you're rationalizing this already, so I don't need to go further into it. But this intensification of authority is what we're seeing. Now, of course, this is why we have all these massive events, these tragic events that are happening all over the world. War, the shootings that are happening. All of this is just to maintain the fear and the necessity for authority, the necessity for people to impose on each other laws and mandates and all of this. It plays out in our arena of humanity as the necessity for having control. We need to have control, otherwise we don't know what will happen. But at the top, it really just means, fine, things are getting in line. Once again, our control is not diminished. But this is of course crumbling over time for several reasons that I'll cover. But again, my point is that you can see that there is a necessity for intensification of authority. And so we shouldn't be surprised that the separate self panicking, the collective separate self, is panicking in the sense of intensifying this authority. We can see that the current surveillance and data collection is nothing but a symptom of the exacerbation of the syndrome of control. You see, all the data collection that we see on our browsers and the NSA and now the tracking of humans and all of this is really just the panicking of the separate self and saying, how else can we maintain track of all of them, because we may lose control of them. They may actually think for themselves and realize that all of this has been our games with rules and laws that nobody wants to play anymore. Nobody wants to play my little game of empowering myself at the cost of everybody else. And so this is why we have all this surveillance and tracking, and we need to know what everybody is doing. And your phone is recording everything that you say, and people are afraid of that. Why? Who cares? Let them record anything. Let them be anything. That's what I say, at least. And that's okay. Some people may say we are against this, and that's fine. That's taking one place. And so this is a good point, or a good place for me to reiterate that I am not in any position. I am not against it, nor am I for it. I just like to see how things unfold and look at them from a neutral point of view. And I think it's right, for people to say, some people may say, oh, we do need all this recording because terrorism. Although that's that's a gimmick that is kind of old already. Nobody cares about terrorism anymore, or at least few of them. It's almost like the amount of people that still watch TV, actual TV, it's going away and it's dying off, just like terrorism is dying off. So now we have other types of creating a sort of game or rule in society. But this is actually natural too. The exacerbation, like I said, of this syndrome of control, this necessity for control. And I think it's pretty obvious that that's really what it is. Those at the top are panicking and just need more and more control. Because we, the people, are finding more ways of not caring about the game, of not playing by the rules. And without the rules, the game crumbles. It just stops being worth a candle. So now, here's where I go with another controversial part, which is, it's very visible right now. And I think this is there's a metaphysical need for this. And this is the emasculation of society. Now, again, this necessity for reducing the vigor in people, the masculinity in people, has been played, I think, geniusly over the past years. You can see this in the trends. Just look at the trends in social media, or even Hollywood for that matter. It's portrayed there subliminally, as usual, in ways that people start accepting this new view of the world, the empowerment of the female, or the woman. Because they don't do it obviously in a metaphysical way. The subliminal part is metaphysical, not the portrayal of it. But this is what you're seeing. And again, I'm entering sensitive territory here because it has to do with identity politics and all of this that is playing right now, which is great. I think it has its beauty in and of itself. But I'm concerned with one thing, which is the emasculation of society. You see, those at the top feel that they need to sensitize society so they can dominate them even more. Now, let's forget gender, biological gender, or any other association with genders here, and let's talk about the feminine and the masculine energy in humans. We can go back to biological genders if we like, but for now, let's just see what they do. The female is very open, it's accepting, it's loving, it's caring, it's tender. That's all of us. We all have a 50%. We're 50-50. We just like to play because that's what humans do. We like to play with our energies, more in one way or the other. But in the end, we all rest in a 50-50. It's our balance. And so, this is natural in all of us. It's a simple female energy. Then there is the male energy, which likes to control things, that likes to put things into order, and it actually creates the structure in which the female energy can move. It's the pattern in which it will move. So they're both complementary. However, those at the top seem to be more of the idea that, of course, you have to have a population that is more feminine than masculine. Otherwise, you will find resistance because you will not impose on society those things that you want. And because you want specific things, you have to sensitize those at the bottom so they will be accepting of everything. Now, look in the past how the elite has failed. And we can go to the perhaps the best example that we have, which is the Revolutionary War in the US, where the elite, in essence, lost its power over the imposing Americans who wanted freedom. Now, of course, they were clever enough to come back and re-establish their dominance. The empire did not end there. The empire moved into the hidden part, as I was saying before. They realized and they learned that they can't be so blatant, so they play more insidious games behind the scenes now. Just as an example is the central bank, which was abolished here in the US because they simply knew that a central bank was being the same thing, the very thing that caused the Revolutionary War here in the US, the imposition of taxes and the economy dominance of Britain in the US. Well, that was just, another iteration of it. They just came, with a clean suit saying, we're going to impose the central bank. And this was, I always confuse it, but I think it was Andrew Jackson who abolished this. And there was a warning out of this president who said, let there not be another central bank lest we lose our liberties and they become the rulers again. Guess what? Central bank came back not even 100 years later. So they know how to play their game. But you see, that was a very masculine society we had here. Again, I'm not saying that it was the right thing or the wrong thing. That's just what happens. But the elite doesn't like this. The elite doesn't like any resistance, any friction against their own needs. And so the emasculation of society has been happening over time, sensitizing people so they don't find resistance. Now, what you see portrayed out there for sensitizing people is of course, the manipulation through the means of propaganda, which is in social media. You can see it with all the movements, which is sad to see because a lot of people actually have been waiting for a moment like this. And I think, this is their time as well for them to have their identities respected and yes, of course, it is naturally, say, the biological woman has been, and of course the gay community has been trampled on for decades, and they're now seeing a liberation of this. But what is sad is to see that they are being used by these trends and creating conflict with something that is very natural also to be in balance, which is the masculine side of society. And so they're putting them at odds, not knowing that we can all live together in the same arena. And even, you see, this goes even deeper, which I don't want to get because there is so much to talk about this, but it's unnecessary in the point that I want to emphasize here. But at least to see that it doesn't matter what identity we have, biological, male or female, or simply mental identity with one or the other. It is all about our energies and not allowing ourselves to have somebody impose anything on us. And so the empowerment of the woman here is being used for decreasing, or rather, I correct myself, increasing the tolerance of things. And the intolerance actually being for those who simply are realizing that this is just a propaganda. And so they play the sensitivity of people for the use of this propaganda. So it's a very clever way, just like they came back with the central bank. They're coming back with the creation of a very sensitive society in these topics, not knowing that in the end what's happening is that there is more compliance and the lack of resistance basically for anything, because the trend simply says so. So in short, what we're looking is the unfolding of those things that are becoming more obvious. Certain things like these, because like I said, they're very sensitive in their nature. I don't think people are going to see it right away. This may require more time to see how certain groups, identity groups, have been manipulated, and it's not about them, it's how they have been used for their own purpose. Let me give you an example of this in the masculine side. Militaries have been used for thousands of years for their own purposes, for the purpose of the elite, I mean. You see, people who volunteer to be an army man or woman, they do it because they have a deep desire to defend their nation. They have a very strong love for their people. And they have been used for geopolitical moves. Now, they are unaware of this. They are being manipulated into believing that they are defending their country. But a lot of people are realizing that that's not true, that you're not defending your country, you're defending the interest, not even of your country, but of an elite that doesn't even reside in your country. May have some franchises in your country, sure. And so people are waking up and saying, well, all I have been doing is simply defending the interest of a few corporations. That's madness. So that is one way in which you can see that the masculine side of society has been manipulated, because guess what? You need the masculine, the male strength to go and kill people, to go and do unkind things. And so they use that. Well, now you're seeing the opposite. They're using the feminine side of us to be more tolerant, to allow everything to be. And the masculine side of us, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, a male, or if you identify as whatever, It is that masculine side of you that is being emasculated for the purposes of more tolerance and being afraid of speaking your mind. And so they empower this idealistic way of looking at the male and the female and all the identities that go with it. So they create their own structure, and nobody dares to talk against this structure because they're speaking against the sensitivities of all of these people. It has nothing to do with that, and it's very intricate. It's just a genius move that the collective separate self is doing, but that is only revealing themselves even more and more. You see, like I said, this revelation may not be as obvious right now. It will become more obvious over time. Right now, a lot of people are going to feel attacked and offended by these conversations, and that is okay. That is fine. That is exactly how things unfold. You want to know how this has unfolded in the past, and it's now so obvious, but it really is just information that is there for people to see. Look at UFOs. People have been talking about UFOs for almost 100 years already. The population, they have been ridiculed over time. They have been, they're just idiots who believe, in UFOs. Same thing with spirituality, but I'm not going to get into that. People who believe in true mystic spirituality have been ridiculed over time, and that's okay. UFOs, the same thing. However, UFOs, you can go out and see how the Pentagon, officials have released information and have said, yes, they are real. Not only UFOs, but ETs, they are real. That is out there. But you see, the language is already so clouded in this enigmatic view of ETs. Oh no, that's just imagination. Well, I mean, how far do we have to go to put it as real news? I mean, it's real news already. UFOs are out there. So the UFOs had to go through that. Fine. The hidden elite, that's another one. For decades, or hundreds of years actually, our forefathers here in the US, they talked about this. They said, there is a hidden elite that wants to take control over everything. I mean, it's there. You can go read it. But no, they were referring to, of course, the monarchs in Britain and so on. No, they were talking about the true elite. Lincoln talked about this. JFK, rest in peace, talked about this. So the hidden elite is something that nobody wanted to talk about. Oh, that's so obscure, that's just people making up things because they're paranoid, conspiranoia. Well, now it's pretty obvious. Everybody talks about it. It's common knowledge. Let's talk about another one, financial hegemony. The monopoly of finance. No. Capitalism gives equal opportunities to everybody. I mean, if at this point in our financial collapse, which has been predicted for decades already too, if nobody's seeing the financial hegemony and following the money so you can see who are the ones owning the world, then again, it's just people who don't want to get into this. And that's fine. But we can't say that this doesn't exist. One thing is to not want to get your hands dirty into all of this, and the other one is to dismiss it as something that doesn't exist. Let me go to another one, health scam. The health sector. We know, 2020 was the best catalyst, the global catalyst that we could get to see how the health industry is a scam. I recently talked to my farmer who I buy my food, my vegetables, and now there is harvest. And she was telling me of how, these are farmers who really they usually don't care about all of this information, but they are aware and they know that this is a scam. They just lost family members because of the respirator system that I don't even understand how this is still part of our health system, but I suppose there's a reason for it. And then the respirators that they use for treating people with COVID. So people are becoming aware of this. They know that this is all, I mean, you get into the hands of a doctor right now and your health is in danger, my friend. I'm not a financial or a health advisor here, so do your own research. But one last point that I would like to talk about is false flags. False flags is something that has existed for over a century already, and it's a tactic of the government. But it was always shrouded. 9/11, false flags. Oh no! You're just not a patriot here. You're just being a conspiranoia. Well, that's pretty obvious right now. False flag on the COVID-19. It's just all over the place. So my point is that all of this information is out there for the collective consciousness to see it. It is our own hands covering our eyes that don't want to see it, and that's okay. That is fine. I think that is part of all the darkness that is being revealed. It's like when the dawn comes and the shadows recedes to the corners of the horizon. You can see that they're trying to move away from the lights. This is what's happening. And so we may cover our eyes and say, I don't see the dawn, I don't see the information, but eventually you're going to have to see it. Not you as an individual, I'm talking about the collective consciousness that will have to see it and accept it. And I believe this is why we have generations, because some people are just not, they're not cut out for this. They're too sensitive actually to be able to see all of this all together. And it may take time. I have been able to see courageous people go through their own awakening and seeing all of this for what it is. And that's great, but I think that's why we have generations. Generations will be able to digest and see this as history and as part of society, and they'll be able to deal with this more efficiently. We, who are aware of this, can only make it easier for them to deal with all of this, letting them know that this is all part of a process of purging that collected separate self that we're seeing. And so you can see this as the feverish dream of reality as it heals and wakes up itself from its slumber. That's how I choose to see it. I don't take part in any of the rules of the game and what people decide that this is the new identity or this is the new politic that we need to follow, or this is... I simply have a compassionate, not caring, if I can use that. I see it as the game that is being played on planet Earth, that humanity is playing. I simply don't have stakes or stocks in any of it, and what I do have is my own choice, my own discernment, and my own way of seeing things. And this was my way of sharing all of this, because the inevitable is that we will all become a lot more aware of the workings of reality. And so with this, I come to the end of this rant and monologue, this episode about authority. What is authority? Well, what we make of it. With nothing else to say, I thank you for listening as always, and I'll catch you on the next one.